My name is Yan Zheng. I am IQT's Chief of Staff. And for those of you not familiar with IQT, we are a not-for-profit global investment platform that accelerates the introduction of groundbreaking technologies to enhance national security and prosperity for America and its allies. For more than a quarter century, IQT has delivered significant mission impact by forging a unique partnership with the US government and playing a central role in building a global security investing community.
I firmly believe that national security at this point is not simply who has the most tanks and guns and ships and planes, but it is technology domains. I mean, as a former wireless guy, Huawei was such a wake-up call for me, and not only Huawei as a company, but also the fact that China was suddenly moving aggressively into the standard-setting bodies. I mean, that was something where we, I think, had always dominated. I think bio is going to be an area that we're going to have to think longer about. Critical minerals, we've had a couple of convenings on that. They may not be at the same size as chips, but we're going to have to think that all through. But one of the things that I've also been very involved in, and why I think this kind of gathering is so important, is how do we deal with the capital stack? And the CHIPS money has helped some of the incumbents, and hopefully we'll do some more, in at least bits and pieces. In-Q-Tel, I think, is an extraordinarily valuable entity in the whole ecosystem. We've seen other nation states start to copy that. The UK has one, NATO has one, kind of this governmental entity. I do think, I don't know if anybody's here from DIU, but I do think DIU is, on the defense side, has got a clearer mission now, more money, but a clearer mission. So maybe In-Q-Tel can help on the early stage, but DIU can help kind of get you through that stage, the old VC term of valley of death. But we really, one of the things I've tried to work on for some time is how we better arrange the capital stack in a way that's trusted. I hope that you can still count on me not only as a supporter of In-Q-Tel, but a supporter of innovation. I think it's going to be an interesting ride for the next year or so as the new administration comes in. My hope is that they will keep this focus on innovation and recognize that, I hope they also make clear that, and acknowledge that China is a great nation and our beef is with the CCP and Xi Jinping, and not with the Chinese people or the Chinese diaspora. I think that's really important. But the way that's going to happen is from rooms like this where funders, entrepreneurs, and folks who are part of this ecosystem can really make things happen. So, Jan, I very much appreciate you having me here this morning.
The key technologies are, we often say dual use, but they're actually primarily civilian. The development is primarily in the commercial market, which means that governments on both sides are less relevant and also less able of screwing things up. And the advantage the Chinese have is not that their government is full of geniuses or that they've managed to structure it extraordinarily well. Is that they've got a vast market with relatively strong commercial incentives that's making progress despite the fact that their government regularly makes significant errors in technology policy. In Silicon Valley, many of you will be well aware, everyone who made their career investing in semiconductors in the 1960s and 70s and 80s is now retired. And indeed, at the most famous venture capital firms in the world, there's now hardly anyone who knows about semiconductors. Sequoia and Reason, these are companies that at a time, many decades ago, were spending a lot of time and money building semiconductors, and now they're focused entirely, in most cases, on other segments of the technology sector. And that's bad news, because these are the firms that, in many cases, build the technology companies of the future. And the reason for that, I think, is pretty straightforward. There's a generational dynamic. The generation that focused on semiconductors retired. The generation that made their money in consumer internet or in SaaS products is now leading these firms. But the bigger issue is that the return on investment in software products has historically been much higher than the return on investment in semiconductors. The capital intensivity is high. The durations over which you must invest before you reach your market is long. And so for investors, there's a very rational process of focusing on something besides semiconductors and related technologies. And I think the good news is that we've got groups like this that are, I think, succeeding in a big way in bringing together government, industry, venture, and academia to build the networks of people that understand the importance of this issue and understand the business models behind this issue, understand the technology behind the issue. I would submit that 5 or 10 or 15 years ago, this ecosystem was not nearly as tightly knit as it is today, and there's a lot of people who are participating in conversations like this that were not several years ago. Second, I think in the venture space, there are some new entrants that are playing an important role, and government, I think, is redoubled its focus on this, whether it's DARPA, whether it's the CHIPS and Science Act. I think we see a new focus relative to a decade ago, recognizing the importance of microelectronics. I think the third thing is that we're having some success in making microelectronics cool again, which I think is extraordinarily critical when you're talking about training the next generation.
How do you create an ecosystem and a application process in which to invite all of those companies in, and then have a North Star as to what we're going to fund and why? And we need to have that vision right away. But then, as we learned along the way, to quote Mike Tyson, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face, right? And so we had this vision, we devised the process, and then we were hit with 500 statements of interest of companies that want to propose things to us, more demands on our funds that we had, and incredibly complex negotiations for building. And it was a really gratifying experience, and I think one thing that I would like to let the public know about what we do is that we are moving as fast as possible, we are learning as fast as possible, and our goal is to achieve as much national and economic security objectives and goals that we have laid out as much as possible.
So CHIPS, I think, was meant to address across the full value chain of companies that are trying to move in different ways. The big emphasis, obviously, is on getting major companies to reshore here and serve as hubs to catalyze additional investment. There also is a goal, hope, to foster companies to move further up the value chain, right? Which is like the companies that need capital investment but are earlier revenue or more innovative technology that the market isn't meeting. And then there's a desire across CHIPS to incentivize, seedlings, right? Research and development and the sort of earlier stage. If you are doing values-based industrial policy, which is where this president was always focused and where this administration was focused, it does take time to make sure those values are instilled in the right way. This was not a post-financial crisis program that was designed to get money out the door as fast as humanly possible. This was a make smart investments that create good jobs, that are sustainable, that are tied to business metrics. And I think that while on an individual case, and my colleague to my right here will have some thoughts on this in the private sector, which I very welcome hearing, that on a macro basis, you have to leave time for those negotiations to happen to make sure that what you're implementing is something that really does push the bounds on all these different fronts. And yes, compromises will be made in negotiations like every negotiation, but for industrial policy to succeed, for future CHIPS programs, you have to leave this in a place that not only gets the money out the door, but gets it out the right way. And I think that's very much what the lesson learned has been.
Everybody we talk to, they recognize the technology, but when we get through the motions of having to bid, having to compete with other guys and all of that, we don't get money. So we're lucky. I shouldn't say we don't get money. We have In-Q-Tel as one of our investors. Michael, I'd like to thank you. He sits on our board, actually. So In-Q-Tel has been a huge supporter.
I think it's important to recognize that the Chinese system is very different from ours, and I in no way would recommend that we replicate that. But I think the way that China has approached this, it's very government top-down driven. There are strategic indicators set and goals set that come from the government, and a lot of the funding basically encourages companies to move towards that. And I think one of the things that we're seeing, before export controls were in place, it was still, even though that there were these directives for Chinese companies to basically indigenize certain parts of the supply chain, it was still difficult, not just technologically, to innovate and catch up, but it was also difficult for these Chinese companies to sell their products and their equipment to their Chinese customers, because the Chinese customers still recognized that they were driven obviously by market dynamics, and the foreign products were still better.